This list probably isn't the first one that comes to mind whenever you think of Destiny heroes, but nonetheless, here we are. We're playing Dark Magician Plasma. Now, a bit of lore behind this deck. This video is... this isn't actually going to display the reason for which this deck was built. Initially, I looked at Break the Destiny, looked at its effect. You destroy a level 8 or higher Destiny hero in your field, and your opponent skips their next main phase 1. Pretty cool, right? I was planning on making a funny meme video, and it was going to be funny. That never actually happened. What instead happened is that we were using this card's secondary effect, which allows you to banish it from the graveyard to search your deck for D-Force, and instead of us memeing on our opponents and skipping their main phase 1, we were just absolutely decimating people with Destiny Hero Plasma, backed up by D-Force. So what exactly is the logic behind this? Well, of course, Plasma is a monster you can special summon by sacrificing any 3 monsters, which is surprisingly easy in Dark Magician. And the reason we're using Dark Magician is because it becomes very, very easy to draw a shitload of cards. You can discard your Break the Destiny very easily off of the likes of your Magician Souls. It's very easy to get a hold of things. You can stack your deck quite handily. There's a whole bunch of reasons as to why we chose to do it in Dark Magician. Primarily, of course, it was also to enable DPE more consistently, because we could go Verte and summon out DPE, and then we use Denier to come back for more tributes, so on and so forth. So there was a ton of reasons as to why Dark Magician was the way we wanted to go, plus it was pretty funny. But yeah, the reason behind it, so Plasma, very easily summonable. It's a skill drain for all of your opponent's monsters. So long as this is face up, all of your opponent's monsters have their effects negated, which is broken, right? But normally the downside of that is Plasma, outside of monster negation, is quite easy to be taken care of, right? He's relatively small, he doesn't have any built-in protection, so he's not that hard to take care of. Well, that's where D-Force comes in. D-Force has several effects that only take place when Plasma is on the field. Number 1, your opponent cannot target any of your cards with card effects. That is your Plasma, that is your Eternal Soul, that is anything in your field untargetable, which is automatically pretty damn good. Then, your Plasma itself cannot be destroyed by card effects, making him even more resilient. So now it can't be targeted, can't be destroyed. And lastly, he gains 100 attack for each monster in either graveyard and can attack twice per turn. So he becomes an absolute juggernaut, and very, very difficult for many decks to get rid of, and he can enable very, very aggressive plays. The only downside to D-Force is that so long as those effects are active, you don't draw during the draw phase, so you're sort of committing to the resources you have, which is yet another reason as to why we're using the Dark Magician, because of the fact we can utilize Eternal Soul and Dark Magical Circle to continuously loop the resources that we put into play before D-Force, so that we're not at a sort of grind game disadvantage. We're able to continuously pick up the slack and continue to keep ourselves in the game. That's not a long-winded explanation. We're going to be doing a card-for-card deck profile at the end, so if you want to see that, stick around. Of course, subscribe if you want to see more videos as they're coming out. Like this one if you enjoy watching it and want to show a little bit of support. And if you want to show even more support, you, of course, can become a member, either in the description or with a little join button. If you want to show that extra little bit of support, you can absolutely join as a member. Every little bit adds up, and it's very much appreciated. We had a phenomenal month in August, and again, I'm just hoping September works out to be as good, if not better. So let's just keep up the momentum, keep on the grind. Let's get into the gameplay. Alrighty, getting into game 1 here. Pretty decent opening hand. We got the Rod, we got D-Force, we got the Apprentice Illusion Magician. So you'll normally search this card off of Break the Destiny, but again, if you hard open it, that suits us as well. It can also add Destiny Hero Plasma back from the graveyard as well. So if you're in a position where maybe you have this in hand and you also like hard draw your Plasma, you can also find a way to discard Plasma, so you're still generating advantage off of D-Force. That doesn't matter. Either way, we use D-Force, we search our deck for Plasma. We're going to start by normal summoning the Rod. We're going to grab Dark Magical Circle. Whether you grab Circle or Eternal Soul here is entirely up to you. I typically just gamble on it because it's, you know, funny memes, it's Dark Magician, and we happen to hit an Eternal Soul anyway. So it worked out. We're going to go for the Apprentice, dropping a Maxi, summoning itself out. We're going to grab a Dark Magician from the deck. Now we're going to link these two off in the Predator Plant, Verte, Anaconda. Verte Anaconda, going to send Fusion Destiny to the graveyard, going to send the materials for our Destiny Hero, Destroyer, Phoenix, Enforcer, and with that we're going to end our turn. Now what exactly does this board do? Of course, we have our DPE pop, we have our Circle Banish, so there's 2 interruptions, plus we got Maxi, and we're setting ourselves up so that next turn we have the ability to tribute the Dark Magician to Verte, as well as the Denier, by like bare minimum, for our Plasma. So we're setting ourselves up for a follow-up Plasma, which is going to be very, very powerful. We could realistically have summoned it that turn, but it would have been very awkward. But nonetheless, we're going to be playing here. We're going to go for Max E, getting hit with Call by the Grave. So there you go. That's actually okay. We don't really mind getting hit with Call by there because we have a few decent cards in the graveyard that we would want to use. So eating Call by there does mean that we're going to be keeping those. We're going to go Allure of Darkness, banishing Oblivion King, Abyss Ragnarok. We're playing against Triple D. If I could X off this page, I would appreciate it. We're going to pop that High King Genghis right before it gets started. Reason being, High King Genghis has a spell or trap negate during the turn player's turn. So this card would be a little bit of a problem because it would be able to negate our Eternal Soul. So I'm going to get rid of that before we put ourselves in a position where we need to activate Soul. Just a bit of a preventative thing. They're going to go Swirl Slam from Grave, summoning out the Copernicus from the hand. Copernicus sending Necroslime. Normal summoning goes before activating Necroslime to fusion summon into a Flame Genghis. Just a small Genghis this time, so we're going to use our Eternal Soul this time. We're going to summon out the Dark Magician. We're going to snipe that Genghis, get that out of here. The reason we're focusing so much on these fusion cards is because the way Triple D normally works is they want to maximize on their level 6s. So they can go into their Wave King Caesar, right? Wave King Caesar is a rank 6 that is very, very powerful. So we really don't need to be dealing with the High King Caesar. So we're going to bring back Rod, grabbing Rod from the graveyard, tripping off the Dark Magician, banishing the Genghis. Again, the Dark Magician on the field doesn't do very much for us, and we would really like to have that Rod in hand. They're going to play 2 skills from the deck, summoning out Copernicus before using this to bring back their High King Genghis, paying 1,000 life points. Unfortunately, they don't have the ability to extend any further. They are going to swing, but they did use their Abyss King Ragnarok, which has the damage that they deal for the rest of that turn. They're going to go and do another Gilgamesh. That's specifically just to trigger the High King, and then they can use these 2 cards to go into the super... Right, this is a card... I don't know why, I've been playing against quite a bit of Triple D recently, and they all seem to be playing this card, which is not a card I ever played playing it, but it's really cool, actually. The way this card works is that so long as it's face up, your opponent cannot target any monsters you control with card effects, full stop. So that means our circle is no longer able to target his monsters. So that's a bit of a problem. So let's see how we're going to get around that, and I think anyone here watching has already figured it out. We're going to bring back DPE, of course. DPE would be able to just out it very easily. We're going to start off with Rod here. Rod, normal summoning, grabbing ourselves Secrets of Dark Magic. We're going to use DPE. They're going to go for Triple D Headhunt. Our out has been outed. They're not only negating DPE, they're stealing it for the rest of this turn. So that is now their Destroy Phoenix Enforcer. We're going to bring back our own Dark Magician. No Dark Magician then. Going to trigger off the circle. Going to banish off the Abyss King Ragnarok. Denier in the graveyard activating, so we can tribute all 3 for the Plasma. Plasma, of course, enabling our D-Force. Plasma going to target one of his cards, suck it up. We're going to take the Gilgamesh, so it doesn't trigger its graveyard effect. Swing in, and we're just way too big, way too tough to deal with. Opponent cannot deal with the Plasma, especially not with the Dark Magician coming back every single turn. I thought it was a pretty good game. Plasma, of course, only coming in at the end. Unfortunately, our opponent didn't let us get aggro with it. We didn't get the chance to swing and beat thine ass, but yeah, we did get a chance to at least resolve most of the plays built within the deck. So a very good replay overall. Let's get into number 2. Alrighty, getting into number 2 here, and here we have the Break the Destiny card. So we've already covered off this card's 2 effects in the intro. Looks like we're playing against some sort of reptile deck, which is pretty funny. I should mention that most of these replays have happened in casual because it was supposed to be a meme, and it turned out to be pretty powerful. But Break the Destiny, of course, is one of these central cards of the deck. It can either skip your opponent's main phase 1, or it can search your deck for your Plasma, or even both. So this card is pretty nuts. And the deck has so many ways of discarding for advantage that it's ridiculous. We have Souls, we have Apprentice Illusion, we have tons of cards that discard for advantage. Our opponent is playing Abyss, or Ogdagiak, or whatever the fuck his name is. It's Abyss. I'm not overly familiar with many of the plays that Abyss plays here, so I'm gonna hit the fast forward button. We both draw, we'll move discard 1. I'm gonna trigger Break the Destiny in the graveyard now. We may as well. We do draw a second copy, but we just discarded it. It's a trap, so you can do this during your opponent's turn. We're gonna grab our D-Force just to minimize the chances that we draw into it, basically. They're going to grab a spell card there. They're not going to use that card. Water Lily. Water Lily sending a monster to the graveyard to bring back 1 from the graveyard. Okay. That's going to trigger off the Night Sword Serpent. What the fuck are you? That's pretty cool. I'm not going to lie. Bringing out King of the Feral Imps. King of the Feral Imps, of course, being able to search the deck for another reptile. Adding to the hand the Light Serpent. Tributing off 2 here. Linking off into the Alien Shock Trooper M-Frame? Alien Shock Trooper M-Frame. This is a pretty cool retrain of an old 1900 vanilla beater. That's pretty awesome. I'd never actually seen this card played before, so this is a very interesting matchup. Playing some A counters on itself, summoning out the Light Serpent, Monster Reborn, bringing back another one of their monsters, just hard playing the Monster Reborn, I guess. Linking off 3 into the Cosmic Slicer. This guy has an animation. He is horrible. Look at that art. Not a nice monster to look at, and our opponent's going to end their turn there. So what exactly does this board do? I have no idea, but let's find out. So we're going to draw for turn, drawing into another Preparation of Rites. We're going to start with Salvation, playing Eternal Soul onto the field here. We're going to go for Preparation of Rites, grabbing our Illusion of Chaos. Illusion of Chaos now activating its effect. Going to grab the Magician's Rod from the deck, shuffling itself back in. We're going to summon a Rod. Rod going to get searching for Soul Servant. Soul Servant then we're going to hold off on. We're going to go for the Apprentice first of all, grabbing a Dark Magician from the deck, which will then drop for another Apprentice. This time going to be met with the effect of the Abyss Queen. The Abyss Queen is going to bring back a monster from the graveyard. Sure, cool stuff, I guess. Now the monster they brought back is going to bring back another monster from the graveyard, and this one is going to search their deck for a spell card. Neat. D-Force time. D-Force going to grab the Plasma, and before anything else happens, bang, instantly, as soon as you summon the card, the whole field is negated. Your whole field is untargetable. Plasma is indestructible, and he is about to get swinging. Boosting himself up, stealing an opponent's monster. He is, however, going to trigger off a trap card here, tributing an alien monster to destroy all monsters in the fields without A counters until that your opponent controls. That ain't happening. Plasma is indestructible thanks to D-Force, so it does nothing. Stealing his monster, boosting up the 4,350 attack points. Activating now the Soul Servant, revealing the circle. Going to activate Soul Servant Engrave, going to banish it, going to draw one. Of course, the circle that we put there, circle then activating into the battle phase, taking out the Cosmic Slicer, taking out another one of his monsters. I don't know that one's name, but now passing back to our opponent, we have the full D-Force setup alongside the Eternal Soul for bringing back the Dark Magician during our opponent's turn and banishing their cards. They're going to activate the effect of a Reptile Engrave, summoning it out to the field, going for the spell card that they searched for last time in the King of the Fair Limps again, but it doesn't matter. You're negated. All of your effects don't work. We're going to go for Dark Magician during our opponent's turn, activating the Dark Magical Circle, of course, to banish the spell card because we don't care about his monster. And just like that, like this is lethal on board. We don't need to do anything else, and we decide we're not going to BM, swinging into the Feral Imp, 4650 to the face, not once, but twice. Plasma taking the win. It's just wild how often that is enough to just instantly win you the game. There's a lot of outs to Plasma out there, but that number falls drastically as soon as you play D-Force. Like, you know, a lot of people say, like, oh, there's some Plasma, just imperm it, veil or do whatever. But you can't do that anymore. Now you can't target it. You can't destroy it. It's not possible. You can't. The next best thing you could do is if you, like, evenly matched or Lightning Storm to wipe out most of the cards, and then you also need to have the out to Plasma, right? So you have to have outs to the other cards before you even have an out to Plasma, which is just ridiculous. I'm sure it doesn't work out every single time. Obviously, there are ways of beating it. It is a rather linear strategy, but at the same time, the vast majority of interruption types within the game right now, just, again, it's very difficult to deal with. But either way, let's get into another replay. Alrighty, getting into our third and final replay. Opponent starting off with Psynet Manning, dropping the Feather Duster, going to grab themselves a G-Golem Pebble Dog. I was actually pretty impressed by this board here from our opponent. Going for the Pebble Dog, going to summon another one from deck here, going into the Splash Mage. Splash Mage going to grab back the Cybers from grave, summoning it into the field on defense. We're going to bring out the Decode Talker Heat Soul very quickly into the Heat Soul here, draw an extra card, revealing the Code Generator in the hand to link someone off into the Code Talker. That's going to trigger Generator in the graveyard, sending Dot Skipper to the grave. Dot Skipper will then, of course, summon itself to the field. Now they're going to use these two to go into a Transcode Talker. Transcode Talker then brings back the Heat Soul from the graveyard that they sent there earlier, and I believe now they're going to set to and pass. So what they have right now is an untargetable field of monsters boosting each other up. Heat Soul, of course, is going to get drawing for an extra card, and they've got a couple of face downs, and we're playing up against Maxi. No negates for Maxi in hand, and I have a feeling if we let this turn go, we're probably going to lose. So we got to play and see what we can basically get done here. Playing under Maxi against 3 mystery cards, untargetable field, pretty well boosted up here. Starting off with an Imperm into our Magician's Rod. No search for us on the normal summon of the Rod there, unfortunately. That's pretty big, but luckily we did open a pretty solid hand, so we're going to go for the Illusion of Chaos just to be met by a Psynet Conflict. Conflict is rough. Not only does it negate, it also banishes. So there's two of our primary mechanics already dealt with. We're going to go for Magician's Souls here, sending the Dark Magician to summon it out to the field. And we're going to drop 2 to draw 2, triggering, of course, the Break the Destiny in the graveyard. We're going to chain that immediately to the draw, so we can add D-Force to hand before we actually draw the card, so we don't draw into it. So we're going to pick up 2 now. Fusion Destiny, there you go, that is the justice that we're looking for. We're going to go for Destiny Hero Plasma off of the D-Force, sending 2 to the grave, summoning out the Phoenix Enforcer. The Phoenix Enforcer has the ability, of course, to destroy his cards, as well as reducing their attack points down. We're going to summon out Denier to tribute free for the Plasma into the full Destiny Hero board. Destiny Hero Plasma, yoinking the Heat Soul, Soul Servant banishing itself to draw 1 for instant lethal DP swing, taking out his monster. 4,000, 4,000, game. It's just such a satisfying board. The D-Force Plasma crushes. Now, DP was a large part of that as well, and luckily we had a decent enough hand to play through a number of interruptions, but it's not as if we were playing against nothing there, right? That was pretty cool. Let's talk about the deck. We'll go through some of the strengths, some of the weaknesses, discuss its viability and things like that. Let's just get on to the deck profile. Alrighty, so this deck is fairly straightforward. This deck was not built to play in ranked. This is not like a competitively built deck. However, after testing, I sort of feel like you could modify it slightly to make it more amenable towards ranked. Although even in its current status, it's not as if it's a million miles off, right? The only thing I would maybe change is making some additional room for hand traps. Maybe dropping Illusion or Preparation to 2. Dropping Illusion to 2 maybe. Maybe dropping the Dark Magician Girl altogether. Things like that I would probably do just to make the deck a little bit more open to hand traps, putting in some Ash Blossom, putting in whatever. But this is how we were playing it. The reason we're playing it like this is to enable as many sort of extenders and combo plays as possible so that we could more consistently go into DPE, because remember, the whole point behind this deck originally was Break the Destiny, destroying your DPE to skip your opponent's main phase 1, and then you resummon DPE and you win the game basically. You're trying to win the game off of that. Which is a funny meme, but unfortunately, we never once resolved it because we were too busy winning the game of Plasma. It's just that, it's that simple. We were too busy winning the game of Plasma. So let's talk through the list here. In terms of hand traps, I think it's literally just Maxi. It's literally just Maxi. Of course, like I said, you can make room by cutting things down, making some space. There is plenty of cards you can cut down in terms of their ratios. Some cards you don't need to be playing at all. Like, you don't really need to be playing Secrets and DMG for any of that shenanigans. But you can, and we did, and it was fun. We never used these 2 cards ever, but you know, you can. So let's talk through the deck. There is, of course, 2 very distinct features of the deck. It is a Destiny Hero side and a Dark Magician side. Let's talk about Dark Magician first. Of course, the original Dark Magician, we're playing it at 2. You don't need anything more than 2. 2 is fine. Basically just here for his name more than anything else. We've got Magician Souls here, which is one of the primary extenders of the deck. It has 2 main effects. Basically, in hand, you can activate its effect. You can send a Dark Spellcaster level 6 or higher from deck to graveyard to do one of 2 things. You will either A, special summon Souls out to the field, or B, you will special summon either the Dark Magician or the Dark Magician Girl back from your graveyard. So Souls is an amazing extender. It gets you instant access to either your Dark Magician if you need it, or more importantly, you can summon this card onto the field for its second effect. Its second effect allows you to send up to 2 spells or traps from your field or hand to the graveyard, and you draw that many cards. That's especially useful considering there's quite a number of cards in here that you would like to draw for extra draw power. None more so than Break the Destiny itself, which can banish itself in the graveyard to search your D-Force, like we've covered time and time again. But you have a bunch of other trap spells in particular that you would like to drop to the graveyard. You like to drop Soul Servant to the grave, you like to drop Salvation to the grave, you would like to drop additional copies of Preparation to the grave. So there's plenty of spells that you can drop for extra draw power, which is very, very nice. We have Rod, our main and only normal summon of the deck. Basically, on normal summon, you can grab a spell or trap from your deck to the hand that specifically mentions the Dark Magician in its text. It can also add itself back from the graveyard to the hand during your opponent's turn. If you were to activate a spell or trap card, you contribute a spellcaster to add it back to your hand. That's pretty handy, especially considering your Dark Magician comes back every single turn. So you would usually just summon your Dark Magician off of Eternal Soul, tribute it off, add Rod back to hand, gives you some follow-up. Pretty nice. Dark Magician Girl, here exclusively for its name, for 2 main reasons. Number 1, Soul Servant, of course, getting extra draws off of Soul Servant, which we'll cover in a minute. And number 2, the Dark Magicians, to enable this card's secondary effect upon destruction, which again we'll talk about when we get to that card. This card is exclusively here for its name. The Apprenticed Illusion Magician is here for two main reasons, basically. Number one, of course, it is an extender. You discard a card, you special summon this card out of the field. The deck needs extenders because the entire premise of the deck is going into DPE to enable Break the Destiny, right? That was the idea. So we were definitely playing 3 of this just to get as much extenders as possible. And also on summon, it will search your deck for the Dark Magician, which makes your Magician Circle and your Eternal Soul even more consistent because it basically acts as 3 additional copies of the Dark Magician. It does have a battle phase effect where you can send this card from your field or hand to the graveyard whenever one of your other dark spellcasters battle, and you boost that monster up by 2000 attack in the event. So it's kind of like Honest as well, which never came up, but you know, on occasion in ranked more than once I've had to rely on that effect to win. So it is definitely something worth bearing in mind that you can boost your Dark Magician up to 4,500 attack points in order to get over a particularly problematic monster. So do bear that in mind. Illusion of Chaos, pretty awesome card. This card can basically reveal itself in hand. You get to grab any monster that mentions the Dark Magician in its text, add it to your hand, and then shuffle any card from your hand back into the deck, normally itself. So Illusion of Chaos basically just acts as an additional 3 copies of Souls or Rod or whatever it is you need at any particular time. This card has you covered. And the Preparation of Rites serves exclusively to search for Illusion of Chaos. Being a spell card, it can also be discarded off of Souls to draw additional cards, but primarily just think of this as 3 additional copies of any card of your choosing. So you're running 9 copies of Magician Souls, 9 copies of Magician Rod, 9 copies of the Illusion Magician, so on and so forth. Salvation. Salvation's a field spell. Upon activation, you will play Eternal Soul from your deck onto the field face down. Can't be hit by Ash Blossom because it plays directly to the field. Pretty solid card. It has a bunch of other text on it, but its other text doesn't matter. It's here just to play Eternal Soul onto the field, while also acting as an additional card that can be sent to the graveyard off of Souls to draw some more cards. We got Dark Magical Circle. Not everybody plays this at 3, and in most competitive Dark Magician decks, they tend to play it at 2. I think in this particular version, because we're going sort of full tilt, and we're putting ourselves in positions where we have shitloads of extenders and we're using like the Apprentice Illusion Magician and everything, we very, very commonly have the Dark Magician at our disposal. And because of that, the only real piece we're missing is the Eternal Soul. So we're running an absolute ton of searches and draws and grabbing from deck and summoning from deck. So why not just maximize our chances of getting as many good cards as we can possibly get? So the Dark Magical Circle, basically on activation, you will check the top 3 cards of your deck. If there is a Dark Magician or a spell or trap that specifically mentions it in its text, you get to add one of those cards to your hand and put the rest back in any order you want. So that serves 2 main purposes. Of course, number 1, grabbing additional cards. The amount of games I've won because I've activated Circle and saw an Eternal Soul on top of my deck and grabbed it is unreal. You also get the ability to stack the cards on top of the deck in any order you want. Whenever you're playing 4 million cards to draw you cards, that's pretty important. So now you can do something like putting Break the Destiny on top of the deck, banishing a Soul Servant, drawing into it, activating Magician Souls, drawing into it, right? You've stacked it, now you can draw it, and you can do whatever the hell you want with it. So stacking the deck is also pretty good. Now, but its primary benefit is that while this card is face up, if you were to summon a Dark Magician, once per turn, you get to banish any card on your opponent's field. So it is once per turn spot removal, and it banishes it as well, which is very useful. So Dark Magical Circle, I think, is a phenomenal card, absolutely a 3 of in this particular version. If you're going to take this into ranked, and your solution to the ranked problem is you're going to cut down on your extenders to rely upon more staples, then you might want to drop Circle to 2. But in this particular sort of full gas version, I think it being a 3 is perfectly fine. We get 3 copies of Soul Servant. Pretty important card, very simple card, but it generates you a lot of advantage. As a quick play spell, you will basically activate it, place any card from your deck on top of your deck. Well, you can actually place it from your hand, graveyard, or deck, so sometimes you use it to recycle shit, but not very often. Basically, you just put a Dark Magician related card on top of the deck, and that's it, right? It also has a second effect, though, that allows you to banish it from the graveyard to draw cards equal to the number of different Dark Magician Girl, or Palladium monsters to have different names. So that's one of the main reasons we're playing Dark Magician Girl, is so that if we have her and the original Dark Magician in the graveyard, we can draw 2 cards instead of just drawing 1 if we were to only have the Dark Magician. Not a massive difference. It is it's not exactly game breaking. And a lot of times it's not really worth playing the extra brick in terms of actually having the DMG in your deck, but I didn't mind it. It never really posed a problem. I never drew into her. I got pretty lucky in that regard. So again, user's bias, right? If you find yourself drawing into it, if you get sick of having her in her hand, or you don't think the extra card is worth the brick, then absolutely drop her from the deck. Just do the draw one, which is more than good enough. Secrets of Dark Magic is a quick play fusion spell card and a ritual spell card. Built into one, you can play whichever effect you want, and you can actually employ both, of course, playing both fusion monsters and ritual monsters in your deck. Within the context of ritual monsters, I was going to hold off on this card's second effect until we got to here. So if you decide to use its ritual summon effect, you're going to summon, of course, the Illusion of Chaos, which you don't do very often because its first effect is so much better than its second effect, but it does have an interruption in its second effect, basically. So whenever your opponent activates a monster effect, and this card is on your field, you can bounce this card back to your hand, special summon a Dark Magician from the graveyard, and negate that effect. It's essentially an Omni-Negate, which is pretty good. It's a really good effect, don't get me wrong. It doesn't come up very often because you almost always want to use its first effect, but it is definitely very, very solid. Then, of course, you have the Fusion Summon effect, which can bring out any number of different various powerful boss monsters. We, of course, have the Dragon Knight if you want to fuse your Dark Magician with a dragon. You fuse him with a warrior, you get Dark Cavalry. You fuse him with a spellcaster, you get the Dark Magicians, all of which have their own effects. So Secrets of Dark Magic is an incredibly versatile card that I think does deserve a place in any Dark Magician deck, even if your goal isn't fusion, because being able to bring out the Illusion of Chaos, even in and of itself, is a pretty powerful card. So I definitely would not underestimate Secrets of Dark Magic at all. And lastly, for the main deck, we have Eternal Soul. Eternal Soul, once per turn, will bring back a Dark Magician from your hand or graveyard, even during your opponent's turn, of course, being a trap card. And any Dark Magician you have in your field is unaffected by all of your opponent's card effects. The downside to this card is that if this card ever gets destroyed or leaves the field, then basically your whole field gets wiped out. So it's a double-edged sword. Luckily, again, with the Eternal Soul, it is a double-edged sword, absolutely. But the plus side of it is just too big. Being able to bring back a Dark Magician every single turn, to trigger off your circle every single turn, to give you tribute fodder for your plasma, to give you all of these crazy benefits for your link summons, for your fusion summons, it's too much. It's too much not to want. So absolutely, I think Eternal Soul, playing it at 2 is a great card, and is definitely the win condition of the majority of Dark Magician decks. This one is not the win condition of this deck, but it's definitely something that you will rely quite heavily upon once you have your plasma set up. Speaking of plasma, let's get in and talk about the D heroes. Luckily, the D hero side of the deck is rather limited and isn't nearly as complex. So let's talk about Destiny Fusion first. Fusion Destiny, you can fusion summon a Destiny hero monster from your deck, using monsters in your deck as material, by sending them to the graveyard. So that's going to bring out your DPE. Very straightforward card. It does lock you into Dark Heroes for the rest of the turn, so you don't really want to use it until later into your combo. But ultimately, it is a broken card and can be used directly from the deck off of Verte Anaconda. Now, with any fusion spell, you of course need materials, and the materials that we chose to use were Destiny Hero Denier, as well as Destiny Hero Dasher. Now, if you're a mad lad, you might want to replace Dasher with playing 2 copies of Destiny Hero Malicious. Now, why would you do that? Well, Malicious can banish itself from the graveyard to summon an additional copy of itself from your deck to the field. If I could find the beckoned card here. Basically, it can banish itself from the graveyard to summon another copy of itself from the deck, and it does synergize even better with Denier than Dasher does. Denier, when summoned, will take any Destiny Hero monster from your deck, graveyard, or banish pile, put it back on top of the deck. And how do you utilize that effect? Well, if you control or have in your graveyard another Destiny Hero, this card can special summon itself from the grave to then, of course, trigger its first effect. Now, the idea is that if you send Malicious and Denier to the graveyard off of Fusion Destiny, you will then activate Malicious, banish to summon another one. You then activate your Denier to summon Denier. That puts your banished Malicious back on top of the deck, so you can tribute off these 2 cards to go into whatever you want, and then you can use the Malicious in your graveyard again to summon out the Malicious that you just returned to the deck. So it gives you an extra extender. Very good if you want to be pressuring yourself and going into the plasma plays even more often, just to give yourself those extra tributes. Now, the reason we opt for Dasher instead of Malicious primarily speaking, is because I often, again, as much as Malicious is really good, I don't want to see it in my hand, and there was simply way too many situations where it was being a pain in the ass. Dasher is a pretty decent card as well. It does meet the level 6 requirement of DPE, because at least one of your materials does have to be level 6 or higher. It is a level 6, and also while this card's in your graveyard, during your draw phase, if you draw into a summonable monster, you can instantly special summon that monster out to the field using the Dasher. So if you were to draw into DMG, Dark Magician, whatever, instantly out to the field. Not a super great effect. Again, it's not like super overpowered or anything, but I wanted to reduce the number of Destiny heroes down so we were less likely to draw into them. But in hindsight, if you want to be even more aggressive, the Malicious play is probably better. Especially if you consider the fact we're playing things like Dark Cavalry to easily put Malicious in grave. I would be inclined to believe that the Malicious would be a better play than the Dasher. This card very, very rarely came up. But then again, we also very rarely bricked on it as well, so do with that as you will. Now let's get into the main win condition, Plasma and D-Force. We've already talked about these cards at length, but I'm going to briefly recap them here. Plasma, of course, so long as it's face up, your opponent's monsters all have their effects negated. Passive negate, and it's as soon as it is on the field, it is a passive effect, which means as soon as it's on there, the effect is in place. There's no time to react, you can't activate any monster effects in response, it's just done, finito, negated, you're finished. So that's really cool, and in a lot of cases, that's enough to shut a lot of decks down. Some decks just outright can't play through Plasma. But what if they draw Imperm, right? What if they have, I don't know, Forbidden Chalice, right? Was a crazy example. What if they have the out? Well, D-Force takes that out away from them. D-Force, so long as this card is face up, of course, I've talked about this already, none of your cards can be targeted. Plasma cannot be destroyed. He gains 100 attack and defense, 100 attack for every monster in either graveyard, and he can attack twice per turn. So he becomes a huge juggernaut, super difficult to deal with for a lot of decks. Not impossible, but very, very difficult to be dealt with, especially considering the field-wide negate. And how do you get consistent access, or at least more consistent access to this combo? That is through Break the Destiny. Break the Destiny, of course, has a whole first effect we talked about with popping a level 8 Destiny hero to skip your opponent's main phase 1. But its secondary effect, very simple, will banish itself from the graveyard to add the D-Force to the hand. So you want to get this to the graveyard as soon as you can, off of your souls, off of your circle, stacking it for you to draw it and send it, so on and so forth. You really want to get this card into the grave, and so you can get searching for your D-Force, get grabbing your Plasma, because D-Force also does directly search Plasma. And yeah, it's pretty fucking dope. It really, really is. The extra deck isn't really all that important. The only card we ever really summoned was DPE. We do have a few fusions and everything in here just because we were dicking around with that. We have the Dark Magician to Dragon Knight fusion, which is of course a fusion of Dark Magician then a Dragon. Its name becomes the Dark Magician while it's on the field or in the graveyard, meaning it can take full advantage of Eternal Soul. It can be revived back from the grave off Eternal Soul, and it's also unaffected by your opponent's card effects. So this card is an incredibly powerful boss monster because he becomes 3k unaffected, comes back every turn, and he triggers Magician Souls when he's summoned back from the graveyard, which is insane. And while he's face up, spells and traps you control cannot be targeted by or destroyed by card effects. So it's like an additional layer of protection. If you have the Dark Magician, the Dragon Knight, and the D-Force Plasma, well, suddenly even your back row can't be targeted or destroyed by card effects. At that point, like, what is even the out? The only outs are literally like evenly matched. That's the only card I can think of. Even Dark Ruler No More doesn't fully out the board. It does hurt because it takes away your skill drain, but your Plasma gets all of its additional protections and benefits and everything from the continuous spell. So the only thing that they'll be negating off of the Dark Ruler No More is the skill drain effect. They're not negating your Dragon Knight. Your Dragon Knight's unaffected. So that's completely fine. Your Dragon Knight still protects all your back row. Your back row still can't be targeted, can't be destroyed. Your Plasma still can't be destroyed or targeted, all of that. So even Dark Ruler No More doesn't out it. The only card I can think of that outs of that board, short of Kaijus and Lava Golem and stuff, is evenly matched. So evenly matched or Kaijus. Literally that's literally it. Are you going to consistently set that up? No. God, no. So I'm not trying to sell that to you as I'm like, oh, this is your RAM board and it's insane. Like, yeah, if you get that, it's disgusting. But you're not really going to get it very often, if at all, to be honest with you. It's not the focus of the deck. It's not geared towards doing that. If maybe if you're a better Dark Magician player than me, you can change the deck to fit that purpose a little bit better. Maybe you're a mad lad, you can figure it out. I'm not going to pretend I sat and thought about it too much, but it's it's cool. If you manage to do it, it's pretty dope. Dark Cavalry is a fusion of Dark Magician and any warrior. Of course, you play warriors that recur and warriors and that can do a bunch of things. So having the cavalry just sort of makes sense. It's better with malicious in your deck, but either way, it is still pretty decent. Basically, gets 100 attack and defense for each spell and trap on the field and in the graveyard, so it gets pretty big, pretty fast. It does piercing damage, and if your opponent activates a card effect that targets one of your cards, you can discard a card to negate it. Its targeting protection's kind of neat. It doesn't mean much when you have Plasma on board, but it's big, it does piercing, and it has a little bit of protection. So, you know what, we play it. The Dark Magicians is one of your more commonly used fusions, but even then it's not really that common. Basically, it's a fusion of Dark Magician or DMG plus any other spellcaster. Once per turn, if a spell or trap is activated, draw one. Nice little pot of greed, this little upstart goblin once per turn, basically, which is nice. You can also, if you happen to draw a spell or trap, you can set it and you can activate it that turn if it's a quick play spell or a trap card, which is actually somewhat useful with the Break the Destiny. That was sort of the idea, where if you didn't like open it up right away, you had like one last gamble at the Dark Magicians trying to summon it, which never really came up, but it is definitely a possibility. And lastly, when this card is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you get to summon back both a Dark Magician and a Dark Magician Girl from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So that's another reason as to why we're playing the DMG. So yeah, pretty solid card overall. Love the draw power off of it in particular. The recursiveness is also decent. Yeah, solid card. Not a game changer, but pretty solid. DPE, of course, being one of the main focuses of the deck. Whenever this card is destroyed by a card effect, it comes back during the next turn standby phase, or at least revives a Destiny hero, including itself. Which is useful, of course, considering both the Break the Destiny's effect, to destroy a level 8 or higher Destiny hero to skip your opponent's main phase 1, it of course being level 8. So it meets the conditions for Break the Destiny, and then it will come back after it's destroyed, or using its own effect. Once per turn as a quick effect, you can destroy one card in your field and one card in your opponent's field without targeting at any stage. So that is a pretty disgustingly powerful effect. We do run 2. You don't have to run 2. The second one never ever came up, but you can technically summon 2 by using Denier to shuffle back the Dasher. Then with Denier on field and Dasher in deck, you can activate a second Fusion Destiny to go into a second DPE. So it is definitely possible, and it's not like extra deck space was tight, so you can do with that information as you will. The Master of Chaos, a fusion of the Dark Magician and your Illusion of Chaos. This card is pretty funny. We don't use it very often, but it is pretty funny. When it's fusion summoned, you get to bring back a later Dark Monster from the graveyard, which is awesome. You get to instantly bring back one of your materials, likely, of course, your Dark Magician. Then you can tribute both a light and a Dark Monster in your field to banish your opponent's entire field of monsters. Again, we don't play a ton of light monsters, if any at all, so that's not really going to come up super often. I think the only one we play is like literally Selene. It's literally Selene, yeah. So I don't know if you wanted to like include a light Link monster, maybe. I don't know what it could be. Let's have a little look. See, Artemis maybe. You want to include Artemis in your deck to help trigger that effect off? By all means, it's not a terrible idea. Helps you trigger that off. Again, we never ever summon this guy, so it's not something I like racked my brain over. But it's something you can do. If this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, target a spell in your graveyard, add it back to your hand. Bringing back any spell card of your choice. Pretty dope. And then our Link package, I'm not gonna bend your ear over the Link package. This is literally just generic cards. We got Link Spider and Imduk. Link Spider and Imduk just both summon themselves over a normal monster. It's mainly here as a method of putting the Dark Magician into the graveyard, but Imduk is also a dragon, which makes it viable material for the Dark Magician Dragon Knight. Realistically, there's no advantage to the Link Spider over Imduk, so you probably want to play just one Link Spider and 2 Imduk if you were going to play this ratio of Link 1s. You definitely want at least one Link Spider though, because this can summon itself over a Nibiru token, which can be very useful for turning it into an effect monster and going into Verte and such. So at least one Link Spider and then 1 or 2 Imduk, just because you can put your Dark Magician into the graveyard to be brought back off of the Eternal Soul, plus it's a dragon, it's fusion fodder. So yeah, not really too much of note there, to be honest. IP, generic links, basically the whole way through here. Dark, Gloomy, Selene to bring stuff back from grave, Apollosa for negates, access code to wipe the board, Very generic link cards, very seldomly use them. The only really link that we do consistently use is Verte Anaconda, which will essentially allow you to fusion summon using any fusion spell directly from your deck. So that is going to be able to very consistently put up your Fusion Destiny simply by summoning any 2 effect monsters. And that's pretty much the whole deck. It's really not that complicated, and I feel like the strategy can be innovated upon even further. Of course, again, I literally we did this by accident, right? The whole point was like it was going to be funny meme time, no main phase 1 for Break the Destiny, and then it just developed into Plasma Beatdown, which was pretty fun and pretty incredible. So if you got this far into the video and you enjoyed watching, absolutely subscribe, like the video. Every little bit of engagement does definitely help, and you can leave a comment below to give your thoughts, share your opinions, give ideas, and do whatever you want. It's there for you. And yeah, that pretty much wraps us up. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.